Before I began and became involved in this project, my knowledge of Louis Sauer was that he was an architect working in Philadelphia when he took on the Golf Course Island, or GCI, project. And then in 1967, he received an award for their design. So ever after, we have been able to describe our townhouses as award-winning. The dates listed for GCI are given as 1965 to 1967. When we arrived in 1968, however, some houses in our block were still under construction. In 1970, our cluster board decided to invite Mr. Sauer for a visit so he could see how the townhouse community he created was thriving. We arranged for him to come in May when the dogwoods would be in bloom. For the very prosaic reason that we had an infant, and he and his wife had their infant with them, they used our house as a staging base. Ignorance is bliss. I had the audacity to tell Mr. Sauer that while we were really taken with our house, he should have made the linen closet larger. In our particular model, he should have made extended the kitchen about 2 feet further out. As I remember, he was gracious in acknowledging that is different from accepting my suggestions. And I have to admit that once our baby equipment left the kitchen, the space seemed to be quite acceptable. This is the front of our house. We didn't choose our house because it was a Sauer house. We chose it because it was available. The house at 11527 Links Drive was empty and ready because an initial purchasing contract had fallen through. It was unlike any house either of us had ever experienced, but then Reston was unlike any place we had lived or visited, so why not? We bought a townhouse in Meadow. What I've learned about Louis Sauer and his work has been of much interest, in part because I have discovered the patterns, the design theory, and the deliberate implementation of them that he developed and practiced often offer definitions for many characteristics of my house that I've most appreciated through the years. My sources are 2 books, you can get them at Amazon, that Cheryl kindly lent to me by one of Sauer's champions, another Italian, Antonio Saggio, and various internet sites, including an extract by a Jim Morgan in 1980, an architect, writing in the Monthly Magazine of Urban Housing. It was published in Tokyo. Sauer is very well known internationally. He was born in Chicago in 1928 and raised in a neighborhood where both Frank Lloyd Wright prairie houses and 19th century mansions stood. He started his college career as a pre-med student. When that did not work out, he moved on to his art history and painting. His first degree was from the Illinois Institute of Technology's Institute of Design. Drafted into the Army, he declared himself a conscientious objector. Then came to serve as a photographer, a craft that he continued as a professional. Louis Sauer was introduced to Louis Kahn in Venice, Italy, when he attended a summer course organized by the International Congress of Modern Architecture in 1956, and then extended his stay for another 6 months. When he returned to the States, Sauer entered Kahn's master's program in Philadelphia and received his Master of Architecture degree in 1959. By the time Sauer took up the GCI project, he had already received 8 awards and citations for his work that included acceptance of his Morton Urban Renewal design for the U.S. Pavilion at the 1964 New York World's Fair. Awards for Golf Course Island included the frequently noted Architectural Record Award of Excellence for House Design, Townhouses, Reston, Virginia. At that time, too, in addition to his practice, Louis Sauer and Associates, he was teaching architecture and urban design at Drexel and at the University of Pennsylvania. In 1979, Sauer left practice for academics at Carnegie Mellon. He taught at numerous universities throughout his career, pursuing urban planning while designing for inner cities, some suburbs, and new towns as well. At one point, he moved to Canada, became a Canadian citizen, and again a practicing architect. He retired in 1997, moved to Melbourne, Australia in 2000, and began teaching as a visiting professor at the Royal Melbourne Institute of technology. Sergio wrote that Serra always displayed, quote, endless creativity and a pragmatism that is only possible within the freedom of American culture. This comes at the cost of not having a signature style, but on the other hand, it allows him to create individual works of extraordinary success. I think that's a very interesting European perspective on our culture. Serra rejected the separation of building from ground, replacing it with the idea of an interwoven fabric. He designed a compact whole in which spaces, streets, buildings, gardens, and paved areas all interact. The author that I was quoting references Golf Course Island as an example of this working in contact with nature, noting the orographic undulations on which the Reston buildings are laid. That is a mound that's out in front of our house. It's been used by generations of children. And in back, you'll see one of the rows of the Golf Course Island. Louis Serra was the first architect to use the low-rise, high-density approach on a large scale. Early in his practice, he came up with a site building unit system that he used in differing forms many times. He developed a grid format that he applied to a variety of sites, usually between 12 and 14 feet wide. A quote, ironically, the first built example is Golf Course Island in Reston, suburban density housing. Here, because of the semi-rural context, at that time it was, and of parking requirements, Serra adjusted the grid site plan and revised the system into a series of 3 basic foundation plans, each of which offer a slightly different first floor plan. Then there are 3 second floor plans, each of which fit any of the second floor plans. Thus, a considerable variety is possible, and more important, a wide range of purchase prices. And what you're seeing is the plans for the smallest house in Golf Course Island. And of course, we have names like, this happens to be called the Green. So we have the Green, the Eagle, the Birdie, the Driver, the Iron. Creativity with some humor too. So. And yes, my house, this happens to be ours, is the largest model is 26 feet wide with side-by-side rooms of 13 feet each. The smaller models also have 13-foot wide room units. So hopefully I can give an example of what he did. It's mix and match, but the widths are always standard. Serra learned a number of other things on the Reston project that dealt with cost-saving benefits that could be realized from his site building unit system. Interestingly enough, it was also at Reston that Serra realized he was imposing architectural form on people who had different values from his own. One example of his following through, when we arrived, we were told that the walls in the house were sour white. Not S-O-U-R, but sour as in Louis Sour, and they were textured, and we were left with some paint to use. That is when he began the behavioral studies as well, that shaped his work from then on after Reston. What I have here are, I thought were fascinating. This is part of the original brochure and gives you a sense of the interiors, but also of the wonderful decor of mid 20th century. This is from a model called the Birdie, which is 3 floors and has a studio on the top, and you will see that there's a deck with the large windows. We didn't at the beginning have any lawyers that bought into Golf Course Island, but we had lots of architects and artists. I think that's an interesting comment. So, next. This is a dining room, and I think you can tell, this is a dining room, and off of the dining room is a deck, and there's a ledge that looks down into a sunken living room. This happens to be our model house. So that is great. When you can, at the ledge, you can almost be in a play. It's a wonderful place for serious living, but also some fun times too. Next. This is the lower, this is the sunken living room. It's a 12-foot ceiling. It's also 13 feet wide, as is the dining room. You can see the ledge for the dining room up on the left. And please note that they are working on their records. They have The Man is Smoking a Pipe, and they are very up to date. The only thing we're missing are the colors of the avocado, gold, and believe it or not, we had a green sofa, I had an orange chair, and I had a gold carpet. So very much into the 60s, okay? Next, please. Okay. This is of the place we call the driver, the green and the driver. Here you have a living room, and then you have a dining area, and in this sense you have the patio, which again offers the center with all of the views. He considered spaces of daily life, diversifying them, dividing and organizing their connections, the sources of light, views they look into, lingering and dwelling upon spaces between housing units, patios, gardens, staircases, streets, and squares as social places. Can you go back a couple? I want to show, next one back. Okay, it's hard to see from this angle, but no, go forward. Up on the right, it's very hard to see, but there's a hole. And we happen to have an in-unit, and so a large window there, and the light comes through that opening and comes down into the living room. And the play of the light over the seasons of the year is just wonderful. We have a young neighbor who asked me, she closed it in her house. She was concerned about maybe the children climbing there. And she asked me what was the original purpose of it. So I tried to explain it opened the spaces, it provided light, it provided variety. This is a layperson talking, not an architect, but I always feel bad that she closed it up because it's a wonderful feature. Okay. Move. All right. This is one of the blocks, and I wanted you to see, this is his idea of the high density, low rise. All of the dark lines are the walkways, and this is just one section of Golf Course Island, but you can see how they are all arranged. And then we have carports, and we also have curb parking, but next block, next. This is another block. This happens to be the block where we live. And the road on the side is North Shore Drive. And again, you can see all of the houses fit in with the walkways and the common areas. We had a wonderful, I don't know if Serra was responsible for designing the play equipment. We had a creepy crawler. Isn't that what it was called, Mark? Creepy crawler. It was this wonderful big wooden construction that was like a huge snake that you could climb on. Of course, you can't have wooden things for children anymore because of splinters, but in the day it was wonderful. Serra undertook his own research. Hang on, one more. Go forward. There. This is a close-up of the rear of our house. We really were in a meadow, very stark. And what I'm attempting to show here that there were connections between houses, but there was also separation. So you had neighborliness, but you also had privacy. And it's amazing how much privacy we have in townhouses that are so tightly packed. Serra undertook his own research by conducting post-occupancy evaluations of his build work. And that is why I realized he so readily accepted our invitation to come and see us in 1970. Next.
It's unforgivable.
There is Golf Course Island. One interpreter of Serra's work noted that within the Golf Course Island development, the complex was designed so that the grouping of individual units with their bold exterior features looks very much like an entire village. And there's the famous meadow in the middle. Trees challenge the view now, unless it is winter. But when you approach Golf Course Island from Wheelie, I have always thought that our cluster looks like a medieval village, missing the castle or church in the center. Though I have never seen any plans or written reference, I was told early on that the center of our meadow was to have a mid-rise as the final step in the development, but that is another story. And there is a question too. References to Golf Course Island refer to 256 townhouses. We have 165 on more than 20 acres, and at the time we're the largest cluster in Reston. I don't know if we still are. What happened to the other 91? The cluster was expanded to include 15 units each of the Golf Course Island pool complex, but they are architecturally separate from Golf Course Island and Serra houses. Finally. This is obviously a later time with lots of trees, and I confess that I was on the landscape committee, and we were eager to have trees. And so we laid out a plan, and we planted. And Gulf Reston was taking up white pines, and so I worked a deal. So for $25 a pine, They would come and they had the big space, and would pick them up and plant them. So we had them all the way around. And needless to say, they now have gone past their lifespan, so now we're having to take a lot of trees out. But Golf Course Island now has many, many trees. And this is, that's Isaac Newton Square up at the top. There's the golf course for those people that don't know where it is, and this is North Shore Drive. Okay? I offer a couple of quotes to conclude. One is from Wolf on Art, Washington Post, 1966. The title was "The Roadhouse Revival is Going to Town, Not to Mention Country." It has been a long time since the architecture of our day has accomplished as much for human livability. Serra's splendid design at relatively moderate prices should remove the last reasonable objections to the row house idea. The houses appear wide on the inside rather than narrow and vertical, and each has an unmistakably individual entrance, not just a kind of apartment door out on the street. I'm almost tempted to call the Serra townhouses a new breakout in townhouse design. Serra was asked, what is for you good architectural design? He answered, most vernacular housing, that is, buildings that are easy to use by many different kinds of people, are constructed with simple materials, allow changes to be made easily, have a building prototype that allows repetition, a fenestration pattern that individually is not distinctive, but is interesting when seen in multiples. There's a young architect that lives in Golf Course Island, and in 2008 he tracked Serra down in Australia via email. After questioning the Inquirer how he had found him, the architect offered this about Golf Course Island. Just now, I don't know what documentation I have left for my design of Golf Course Island. Every move I've made through the years, I've eliminated more and more of my office records. However, I have kept the microfiles of most construction drawings. But I do not believe Golf Course Island is included because back in the middle-60s, another architectural office, the PARD team, was retained by the Reston administration to do the construction documentation for all designs. For me, the Golf Course Island townhouse plans are the best I've done for developmental housing. There was a unique design opportunity for me at the time. Golf Course Island is very special for me, and it is for those of us that live here. Thank you.
We need to run some credits here on this show. Technical assistance was fabulous. Richard Quellen scanned the vintage images you saw, and he helped with some of the presentations together, and he also got us up on the screen tonight. So thank you very much. Also, Matilda Spear and Young a lot of work too, and Jeff Scriven helped me on this as well. Not to mention the Ringerts, all three of them. Wonderful. Thank you. And now, the man who hired these architects would like to have the word.
Some time ago, I was interviewed, and one of the questions that I was asked was, what was the biggest surprise that you had in your experience in Reston? I said I was completely knocked out by the reception that we got in 1967, because we were busy doing our thing here, but all of a sudden, Life, Look, Fortune magazine, front page, New York Times, front page, Washington Post. It was absolutely incredible. And then the greatest challenge to me was when the Japanese sent a reporter over to interview me, and he spoke no English. He did have a truck. I was on Lake Ann side of Heron House, and the truck was up here, and we faced each other. The truck had a translator in it, and the translation was being fed through a headphone. Well, the Japanese reporter was asking me lengthy questions, and I finally persuaded him that my memory wouldn't handle that, and that he should make a very short question. At any rate, if you can imagine the sensation of having all of this happening, that was my greatest surprise. And it's up to all of you to try to help me account for it.